Wanted to start this off by talking about how you're being lied to about developer jobs being automated. It's complete nonsense. There's no evidence of it. And in fact, there's a lot of evidence that people are manipulating you to maybe feel less confident about asking for the right salary or for propping up a stock. But there's really no evidence at all that your job as a developer will be automated or that developing jobs in the future will be automated. So let's start off first with a little bit about my own background with automation. I remember when I was working at Disney Feature Animation early in my career, this is early 2000s, I had figured out a way to automate something that took a whole day to do. We were working in the studio and we had to take editing machines, which were maybe like $100,000 machines at the time, very expensive machines, and do a bunch of maintenance so they wouldn't break down because it was so expensive for editors to do the work. So one of the things I did was I reverse engineered the machine so that it mounted a network directory. And then I was able to network boot an operating system. That operating system had a script that would reinstall the entire operating system. So effectively, I built some automation in code, in Bash in this case, that completely automated the maintenance process by just deleting the entire OS and reinstalling it, but keeping the user data with a network mount point. And this was a big deal at the time because we didn't need to do the work that we were assigned. I remember my boss was very angry at me, which was kind of strange in a way. I guess there must have been some kind of political reason for that. And then also people I worked with were really angry as well. I remember someone that I worked with pulled me into a surprise meeting. I didn't even know I was going to be in this meeting. And my immediate boss and this person were in the meeting, and this guy started yelling at me and saying, "You're going to automate yourself out of a job," and shaking his finger at me. And I remember saying to him, and maybe I shouldn't have been so smug, but I said, well, I'm going to automate somebody out of a job, but it's not going to be me because I'm the one writing the code. And later it turned out that nobody's job was lost. In fact, what happened was we had a lot more time to focus on really complex problems. In film, there are so many things that you could work on. There are hardware problems like the video and audio routing. There's also things with new operating systems that you have to qualify. There's also bugs that happen when you're working on a movie. There's scripts that can automate. So what happened was we just spent more time on different things. And I think that's really the use case that I've seen in my career, is that I have automated a lot of stuff in my life. And I would say less my career has been a software developer, and it's been more about an automator. So that's why I have a lot of confidence in calling BS on the fact that developer jobs themselves will be automated. And let's start with a few different heuristics that will prove why this is BS. One is go to the grocery store and use self-checkout. I'll pause for a second because nobody that uses self-checkout has ever successfully completed every single self-checkout operations. Even if you got lucky a few times and self-checkout worked, there's something where you get triggered. It could be you purchase some wine and then the person has to come over and verify that you're in fact over 21. Or it could be that you have something that's not registered in the system, or it turns out that the machine broke, etc. There has to be a human there. It's possible that there's a small gain, maybe like a 30% gain, because one person can supervise 4 different self-checkout machines. And so you've got a little bit of automation, but that is not full automation. That's just changing the nature of what the person does. And you could even make the argument that the expert who's monitoring the self-checkout is even more valuable than the regular person who is checking out your groceries, because they have to know about the groceries, plus they also have to know about hardware. So it's basically just changing the nature of the job and changing the way that we do things. And it's a very marginal and small increase in automation. And that's what I've seen with a lot of my career as well, is you'll automate this one thing, but then it lets you have more time to focus on another thing that you can spend your energy on. So that's one thing that's an obvious way to debunk full automation. A next one is self-driving, right? If we look at self-driving cars, there's zero evidence that cars are able to be automated with the current technology. There's some useful subcomponents. For example, on the freeway, you can see they have cruise control systems that are pretty nice that, you have to still pay attention to it, but they can follow the car in front of you. There's lane checking where it would potentially notify you that, oh, hey, there's an issue with you going into this lane. Let's correct this. Also, they can park, etc. But they're never at the point where we have this full form of automation, and that's really one of the things that's boosting the stock prices of automobile manufacturers, is that they're saying that, oh yeah, we're going to get full automation. But again, just like when I automated the one editing machine, or if you go to the grocery store and you look at the self-checkout, there's just no evidence that that is actually going to happen. You need another human involved with it. And that's yet one more example. Now, let's continue on failed automation examples. Another one would be content moderation. It's widely known. In fact, I worked as a CTO of a company that built a social network with millions of users. One of the bigger problems, people know this, with user-generated content is you have to moderate the content. You can have all kinds of automation tools. You can detect bots. You can detect, harmful language. You can detect certain images that shouldn't be published, etc. But in a nutshell, always you're going to come into the same issue, which is it's that last 20% of the problem where you have to have humans involved. And that's why with a lot of the stuff that happens with these larger social media companies is they have a huge content monitoring team. And there are people who are looking at images, verifying them, making sure that they're valid images. And there's been lots of human rights issues where, is this a good thing to be outsourcing to a country where people are living in poverty? Are you abusing them? Are you violating their human rights by exposing them to this kind of information? Really harmful or violent imagery, and could it cause long-lasting effects? So again, if the technology for automating software engineering was so good, why wouldn't that be automated? So it's yet another BS example of the fake automation story. Likewise, another really good example of this is data labeling. So we know that with machine learning, in order to train models, we have to label data. So for example, if you were a factory and you wanted to create your own machine learning model that was able to be trained on pictures of the images in your factory, maybe somebody at your factory would take pictures of all of the inventory. Maybe you have 100 different kinds of things you manufacture, and then they would label those. They'd say, this is a tractor, this is a car, this is a ball, this is a bat, etc. That's data labeling. If the software was so good, no data labeling jobs would exist. There are some forms of automation with data labeling where a lot of the data can be labeled automatically. But again, the key word is a lot. That last 20% is the problem. So we see here that there's a track record of the last mile is really the problem, is you can get pretty close, but then that last mile is where things get a little bit murky. Now, yet another example is, let's actually get into writing code itself. So I've been consistently writing software for, let's say 30 years now, and I've never stopped. I've written code in many different languages: Bash, Python, Rust, Go, etc., C#, Java. But one of the things that I've noticed is that when you're writing code, the difficulty isn't necessarily creating the code. The difficulty is in a very consistent way putting code into production and consistently being able to make results. The reason for this is that you can exponentially get results initially when you create software if you write really bad, buggy software. So this is a classic anti-pattern of a bad developer, or even a prolific bad developer, is they could be writing code like 7 days a week, and they could be writing code maybe 10, 12 hours a day. And this isn't that common, but I have definitely seen it. Sometimes the person that's writing code is so bad at writing code, they're creating technical debt that will destroy your entire company. And the more they write software, the worse the technical debt will get. And eventually that exponential relationship turns into an S curve. And now you've gotten into the logarithmic phase because there's so much bugs in your company, you cannot write any more software. In fact, the company will have outages. I've worked at companies that put hundreds of millions of dollars into their organization, and they had bad developers writing code, and then the whole company stops because you can't do anything anymore. There's too much technical debt. There's too many bugs in your software. Likewise, if you think about a lot of the examples that people are using for using these generative AI tools, they're talking about the simple initial phase of software development, building, toy projects or building something that's very simple, but they're not talking about sophisticated real world solutions. And any software developer that has deep experience like me and who has used these tools, and I do like some of the things that these tools do, you realize someone is completely lying when they're talking about fully automating software jobs, because of the problem isn't writing code, it's incrementally writing improvements and putting those improvements into production. This is called continuous improvement, continuous delivery. It's also called Kaizen, or continuous improvement. It was also called DevOps. How do I know about DevOps? I've written 6 books that were professionally published on the topic of DevOps. I'm very familiar with what it's like to incrementally make results and put them into production. So if you think about why are people saying these kinds of things, let's get into potentially the root cause here. One of the root causes is that we do have in America a tech monopoly problem. One of the ways you can easily find this heuristic is if it's $1 trillion company, it's probably a tech monopoly. Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Meta, and they benefit from the automation hype cycle because it could potentially increase their stock, right? People go, oh, look, automation is right around the corner, even though it's not. And so people will then bake that into the stock price. Also, it's a great way to suppress labor, especially as different organizations change or different administrations politically come and go. The thing that you could do is, if you're already having a very low union rights and very, very low labor power, is suppress it even more by creating propaganda that makes people worried that their jobs are going to be automated. So it makes them maybe want to work harder or ask for less money or potentially feel very scared about what's happening. And the more that you can put this hype cycle, the more fear that comes around in terms of giving power to monopoly-based organizations. And also, you can think about this as a way of self-enforcing this monopoly power, because the smaller competitors, maybe they're also going to go, wow, we shouldn't be hiring people, or maybe we shouldn't even compete because these big players will have all this automation, etc. So we also have to put into fact that there already is a very toxic labor environment in the United States. Software developers are not in a union, and that could be a component of the weaponization of automation, and saying that things that are not true are true, so that you have more power over the labeling. Also, I think if we look at things like the film and the music industry, I think it also has some of those same components where you look at this like 80%, 20% problem, where it's true that there are some interesting things that are happening with film or video where you can create an image, but it's got the same problem that I saw early in my career working in film. I worked at Sony ImageWorks. I worked at Weta Digital. I worked at Disney Feature Animation. I worked at all these film companies all over the world, and I saw lots of different ups and downs of technology. And what's always interesting is that whenever there's a new technology developed, people try to use it, but it doesn't necessarily have that last 20% solved. A good example would be the Robert Zemeckis film, Polar Express. This is when they came up with this term called the uncanny valley. The uncanny valley says that like people saw this motion capture technology where they would have people in a suit and they would do some stuff and it would turn into animation. But there's always this thing where they kind of look real, but then they kind of don't look real. And it's hard to know, is it animation or is it live action, or, what is it? And I think we also are going to see this with film and also music, is that there is no concept of automating that last 20%. as someone who has written music in my life, and piano, guitar, etc., at different parts of my life, there's more to even writing music than even the melody. So one of the components is the timing. So what kind of timing are you using, and how do you use that timing? For example, maybe a live conference or a live concert, you could see a very different kind of style when somebody's playing a song, or maybe someone emotionally is really into the music at that particular point. Like maybe like when I saw the Tracy Chapman concert in Oakland, and you can see that there's just this other element. Maybe it's a mixture of timing and the mixture of the voice mixed with the music that really is not replicatable by an automation technology. And what is it that really makes the music amazing? Is it's that intersection of the music plus the person plus the timing all together. So I think really in a nutshell here, let's kind of wrap things up, is that are some of these new tools for software engineering, coding assistance useful? Yeah, I think the best way to think about them would be it's a little bit like a search engine that people were already using with Google, or a forum, or Stack Overflow, where you get some good suggestions and you get some things that might be able to help you, but ultimately it's not going to put the code into production, debug the production issue for you. And a good example also, as like a simple heuristic, is if these tools were so good, why can you not ask for a cloud infrastructure to be built automatically? I'll tell you why, is because infrastructure as code is the best practice that people use. Let's say Amazon CDK, etc. And with this infrastructure as code, this is really the canary in the coal mine. If you're so good at automating, you should be able to ask for a question, and every single component of an infrastructure should be built. I want an elastic load balancer. I want a minimum of 2 nodes, and I want it to be able to go up to 5. And I want this type of image. I want Amazon Linux 2. And you cannot describe it for a variety of reasons. One is that it's hard to express in human language all of the subcomponents of a cloud architecture. It's just too complex. It would take too much human language to do this. Second is that these tools do not have the concept of logic. They're good at remembering patterns. And so there's all these subtle bugs that crop up. For example, if you had maybe a security group that opened up the wrong port, and all of a sudden now people can attack your infrastructure, maybe it created 90% of the correct infrastructure as code, but then it has a security vulnerability. And now that security vulnerability has major company get deleted because a hacker got in with administrative access and deleted your account. There are so many booby traps and false promises with fully automating things that it's frankly ridiculous to say that you're going to automate developer jobs. The only 2 reasons that even make sense would be that, one, someone just doesn't know what they're doing. Maybe they're a dilettante. They're, working for a content or education company. They don't actually build production software. They just hear about how other people build production software, and they're excited, and they're spreading hype, and they're completely naive. Or the other case, which seems a little more likely, is that it's deliberate propaganda to repress labor. So in a nutshell, I would say don't be overwhelmed. Don't feel worried about what's happening with automation of software developer jobs. A better approach would be to think about how you can use any kind of automation tool to make yourself go deeper and go more complex. So I would say using the most deep and most complex languages that are modern compiled languages like Rust would be a good example. Trying to find ways to make things very energy efficient and potentially more powerful could be another way to do it. So I think that's really the way to think about it, is maybe don't do what you've already been doing, which is using a scripting language or using like the easiest possible technology. Instead, continue to go very, very deep and try to continuously improve energy efficiency, computational efficiency, security efficiency, cost efficiency, more complex features. That's the real approach that will, one, help your career, but also is the answer for when people spread FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, is to just go deeper, build more competency, and let all of that noise fall away in the background.